Hey, how's it going, fellas? Today I'd like to talk about some of the issues that I have ideologically with the alt-right. I would like to preface this, however, I do not consider myself alt-right. Admittedly, I tried to, however. I genuinely wanted the alt-right and some of the leaders within the group, like Richard Spencer, for example, to inspire me to something that would help me navigate my way through my own values and viewpoints. I wasn't willing to believe the media hype about Spencer, and I wanted to sincerely know what it was he was getting at. However, after taking a look into the alt-right and hoping that the movement was one that I could identify with, I have found that it was not the case that I could align myself with the alt-right. And this was actually a sincere disappointment to me. So what I'm going to discuss today are the reasons that I found myself unable to identify with the alt-right. Additionally, I must mention that I certainly did not exhaust the available writings and speakings of the alt-right, but I don't know that anybody can truly exhaust the extent of an ideological movement when the internet provides for a virtually unlimited volume of content that can be produced. I'm also aware of the fact that the alt-right is not a monolith, and I do not intend to characterize it as such. The alt-right has a very wide variety of ideals and values among the individuals within it, but this might be part of the problem. And finally, before I get into it, I am in no manner attempting to misrepresent the alt-right or any of the specific individuals that I may mention within it. If it seems that I'm misrepresenting them, then please inform me of my error in the comments, and I will do my best to investigate the error and correct it. Alright, so let's begin. First, the alt-right is not conservative, at least not necessarily. As far as I can tell, securing an ethno-state is not a conservative ideal on its own. While the attempt to do so may be in order to, quote, conserve the racial profile, it is not necessarily conservative by any cultural facet. Furthermore, the alt-right seems to promote many things that are, from an American's perspective, extremely non-conservative. For instance, it is no secret now that the alt-right is vehemently opposed to securing the freedom of speech for the general population. Now this can mean multiple things. Are there certain things that you cannot say, or are there certain things that you must say? While the latter is certainly worse than the former, given that freedom from compulsion is likely the very core of freedom itself, they are both necessarily restrictive. The freedom of speech is literally one of the oldest American values, if not the oldest American value ever. So from the perspective of an American conservative, to dismantle this value is certainly one of the least conservative actions that can be taken. Furthermore, the alt-right, specifically Richard Spencer, is in favor of a very robust, involved, and invasive state as an active agent within society. At least as far as I can tell, Spencer is heavily in favor of a strong, large, and involved state class. And again, from an American perspective, this is a very non-conservative viewpoint to hold. I'm aware that a lot of alt-righters would consider themselves ANCAPs, but it seems to me that the platform of the alt-right holds that the state is to be a large, involved, and active entity within society. Second, the alt-right has few cultural axioms that can be agreed upon by the entire movement. Racial identitarianism seems to be the only axiom by which members of the alt-right can gather upon an agreement. So as far as I can tell, the core axiom of the alt-right's movement is based around racial identity. Now, let us say that the alt-right wins the political and cultural battle it is waging, and the white ethno-state is established. What happens next? What identities and values will bind the people of that state into an actual nation of people? As far as I can tell, no other axioms or cultural values exist among the group as a whole that could culturally bind the group once the racial identitarianism has shed its value of being a political tool. Which brings me to my third point. Third, white identitarianism is a political tool and nothing more. White identitarianism is, without a doubt, a reactionary movement to multiculturalism and the like. This property binds people only insofar as there is a racial battle to be fought. Once the battle is over and the white ethno-state exists, the white identity no longer matters because its use is gone. It is a tool to solidify a group of people to achieve a political and cultural end, and once that end is reached, the quality can no longer matter because it is a quality that, locally speaking, everyone identifies with. The quality of race itself provides no tangible value beyond it being something with which to identify someone who is from someone who is not. Being white bestows no special ability, no skill, no trade, no hobby, etc. My point here is that once an ethno-state is established, I can only imagine that those within it will find that they no longer have any values with which to identify with each other. It will no longer matter at all whether or not your neighbor is white, because your neighbor has to be white. And whiteness on its own does not definitively bestow anything greater than itself, relative to those who have the same quality. It will no longer be something with which to identify with. So basically what I am asking is, once you have a state comprised of white fundamental Christians, whites who adhere to Germanic or Hellenistic paganism, white atheists, white communists, white ANCAPs, etc., how can you expect these people to identify with each other in any meaningful way? Fourth, white identity is innate and requires no input to identify with. This is a problem that I personally have with the alt-right, and it may be more pathological than the rest of my concerns. But in any event, whiteness is not a quality that one can gain. It is only a quality one can be innately granted. For example, I play and I write music, and I've done this for over a decade, and I dare say I am a decent musician. I can very easily identify with other musicians because other musicians can understand the input, the process, and the journey of the becoming of a musician. Also, I'm very much into fitness, dieting, and general physical health, and I can likewise heavily relate to others who do the same, because they can understand the discipline that one must acquire through personal effort to turn down the brownies your coworker brings into work, the doughy pizza your friends order, and the inordinate volume of beer that you are peer pressured to drink when you go out to a bar with your friends. These are qualities that can always be identified with among people who have them, because these qualities are ones that are attained and not bestowed. Being a proficient musician or being in great physical shape are all axioms of identity to be proud of. I feel no pride when my lifting partner benches 315 pounds for the first time, because it was not my accomplishment. I do not feel pride when a friend of mine writes a really slick song filled with great hooks and has a great rhythm. I do not feel pride in these instances because I did not make these accomplishments, someone else did. I genuinely have a problem with someone feeling pride in someone else's accomplishments. Racial pride is nonsensical to me, as you are taking pride in something that ultimately you played no part in accomplishing. No alt-righter living today took any part in the American Revolutionary War or the development of ancient Germanic pagan traditions. No alt-righter living today took part in the establishment of what could be called the Western world. So to feel pride in the notion of those of your race who made great accomplishments makes absolutely no sense to me. I can understand being in awe of what your ancestors have done and understanding that you personally have the responsibility to live up to their expectations of you and to take on that responsibility. However, I cannot understand having a sense of pride in another person's accomplishments yourself, because that pride would be completely unearned. Fifth, the alt-right has no concrete economic policy. I acknowledge that most alt-righters are likely going to be heavily libertarian in their economic values, if not complete ANCAPs. However, this does not seem to be something that the group as a platform of ideas is interested in incorporating. Richard Spencer himself admits that he is not at all concerned with economics, and I have seen a wide variety of economic viewpoints from socialism to anarcho-capitalism. Again, it is heavily libertarian economically, but as far as I can tell, this is not something the movement as its own ideology has come to terms on. I do not know how you parcel the white ANCAPs from the white socialists within the white ethno-state, and this seems to further suggest to me that racial identitarianism is an insufficient means of constructing a nation, and when such a state is formed, it will fail to bind the members of it into a worthy nation. Sixth, the alt-right offers very few concrete solutions to what their problems actually are. One of the reasons I was initially drawn to the alt-right was because I genuinely agree with all of the problems they have with the modern Western world. I genuinely agree with almost all of the laments that the ideology has. However, I've seen very little in the way of prescription to these matters, beyond simply establishing the ethno-state, which will apparently solve everything. Most of the solutions posed are not even sincere or simply would be ineffective. Physical removal is often mentioned within the alt-right, and if you don't know what that means, it is essentially the act of physically removing political dissenters, or potential political dissenters for that matter, from the state, typically by either means of deportation or execution. The alt-right tends to pose this solution in a cheeky manner, as if you can't criticize it because it is a joke, at least That is my experience with it, but I cannot imagine that the solution would be proposed as often as it is if it wasn't partially serious. Generally, the alt-right speaks in descriptive terms, describing the things that they see wrong around them. And I typically agree with them on these matters. However, the alt-right offers, as far as I can tell, very little in prescriptive terms to fix the problem. Now, the National Policy Institute may not necessarily be the end-all be-all hub for alt-right intelligence, but I can only imagine it is a site that is relatively in line with the alt-right's ideas. Given that, you would imagine this site be the archive for the prescriptive goals of the alt-right, but instead, it feels much more like a blog site for the members to write op-ed journalism in. They wrote a piece at the end of 2017 titled "A Call for Papers," and essentially this piece was asking the readers to write policy for the NPI so that the NPI could present it to potential elected officials. To be the institution that, at least by namesake, claims to be a hub of political policy for a given ideology, the attempt to outsource the crafting of that policy to your own audience seems like the institution itself is unprepared and unable to actually craft any policy of its own. Perhaps it is genius to let your audience craft the policy based on whoever in the audience is most qualified to speak on a given matter, and maybe I'm completely wrong. But to me, it seems indicative of an ideology that is undeveloped, uninformed, immature, and frankly, it just seems lazy. Well, that's all that I've got for this video. Be sure to hit all of those hot like and subscribe buttons, and feel free to comment if you think that I've mischaracterized anybody or anything here. Because I do not mind being criticized, but I certainly do not want to be presenting anything that is false, and I'm completely fine with eating my own words. So take care of yourself until next time. See ya.